You're welcome to the Policy Council. My name is Ajai. Today we project political scenarios and possible outcomes for Nigeria. We discuss the variety of elements that impact political risk and outcomes and outlook in the country as we move towards 2015. And those include security, it includes the ongoing national conference, and of course it centers around the 2015 elections which come up next year. I do this with a professor of law and political environment of business from the Lagos Business School. Enjoy the program. You're welcome back. It's still the Policy Council. My guest today is a professor at the Lagos Business School. He earned a PhD in law from my alma mater, the Obafemi Awolowo University. Then it was the University of Ife. And he was in academia at Unilag and also was in business and rose to be executive director in manufacturing sector. And today he teaches law, business law, and the political environment of business at Lagos Business School. Professor, this is third time on the Policy Council. Professor Wale Ajai, you're welcome again to the Policy Council.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
Okay. Let's start from security. I think if there's any political risk factor that is on top of people's minds today, it's insecurity, terrorism, maybe a resurgence of Boko Haram. Some would say it's born out of their desperation, they've been destroyed. But anyway, the practical consequence is they're back in Abuja, have bombed Yanya, they're back all over the east, northeast. They've carted away, maybe we don't know whether it's 100 or 200 girls who we don't know where they are. How do you think this concern around security will play out?
There's no doubt this is a major spanner in the works. All the economic indices are looking good. One would have thought Nigeria should keep in safe territory and concentrate on building the economy, biggest in Africa, so to say. However, this creates worries, not only for international investors, naturally, but the latest incidents have very bad portents. For the past 2 years or so, the incidences have been successfully, pegged to the northeast corner. The Yaya bombings and the incidents in the Middle Belt are very worrying, particularly the incidents around the Fulani herdsmen, who we now hear in news reports are probably
Boko Haram.
Yes. So I think there has to be a genuine worry that the incidents hopefully do not spread across the country.
Let's talk about this Fulani herdsmen. Quite frankly, I am maybe surprised that in Nigeria we have both a security organization or security establishment, a media, even an intelligentsia that accepted the fiction that herdsmen were killing people in 50s, 80s, 100s, and the herdsmen carried AK-47s. So for me, I can say up front that I was not in the least surprised. I had always said that this looked to me like a multi-product company that branded one as Boko Haram and branded one as Fulani herdsmen, but they were essentially the same. So why do you think it took us, particularly the security establishment, so long to establish that this is one and the same group?
I think that we must do some fairly careful analysis. The herdsmen have had over the years incidents of fractious incidents with neighbors all across the country, the southwest, the southeast. And indeed, we've had bad cases of banditry, cases of gun running. These, I think, have mainly been perhaps played down because of the ethnic sensitivity. So it was not entirely a surprise that there might be an infiltration or there might be a camouflage along those routes. I would certainly tend to think that the headsmen, real headsmen, are still doing what they do.
The real headsmen would probably still be doing what they do, would probably still be having conflicts with their neighbors.
Correct.
But they would carry bows and arrows and swords.
They do carry guns. But of course, we now have a very troubling situation because these headsmen have, over the perhaps centuries, moved around the country, welcome because they carry, they bring the cattle and so on and so forth. So it provides a very good cover for these other elements to slip in and out.
And that makes it a much more, dangerous phenomenon. Okay, let's take a short time out. We'll be back and we'll go on to another current top of the mind issue, the National Conference. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. It's my conversation with Professor Wale Ajai of the Lagos Business School, and we're looking at various political and constitutional and legal issues and security issues as well. And we turn to the National Conference, which is, and you're particularly suited to discuss this. You both deal with political scenarios and business issues, and also you're a lawyer and a constitutional lawyer at that. So let me ask. First of all, there are those who will query whether the conference has any standing in legal terms. It's for now, it's something that President Jonathan invited some people to attend. What do you think about that?
I think it's probably an inane controversy.
Okay.
Now, of course, the issue is, could it sort of proclaim a constitution? It certainly cannot. But you really cannot fault too much anyone constituting or convoking any group of persons to talk around issues that relate to the constitution of the nation. So I really think those are not very pressing issues.
In any event, the response across the country, the quality of the attendance, the political legitimacy the conference appears to have drawn from Afenifere, Arewa, Ohaneze, Ndigbo, Ijona, suggests that the country takes it seriously.
I'm not too sure. But certainly with some of these groups that have been vocal over time and seem to represent some of the sectional groups, I think that was a bit of a coup, getting all these groups to sit down and talk. And I think that really is a political necessity in terms of trying to cool down the polity. Now, as to whether it will result in substantive progress, one can never be too sure, because the issue of legitimacy will still crop up in terms of the outcomes of the conference. But I think it really is a useful diversionary tactic. Now, of course, there is also the possibility, which is very unlikely now, that conference could have become a huge embarrassment for the Jonathan government, because if some elements there suddenly, as someone says, turn it into a referendum on the government, it will be day after day of very uncomfortable news. So I think for now, apparently the Jonathan administration seems to have pulled a good rabbit out of the hat.
There's Senator Femi Okunomu who midwifed the conference. I read a report in the newspaper in which he described the conference as made up of two forces. The forces who want the continuation of the status quo, and some forces who are trying to change and who believe that the current system doesn't serve us right. And generally, it seems to have come down to an argument over the kind of federal structure we're going to run, whether it will be a more authentic, a more conventional federal system, or it will be a continuation of a peculiarly Nigerian federation in which you have one police and you have most powers in the exclusive legislative domain of your country, of the executive. Do you agree with that analysis, and how do you think that debate over the federal structure may shape out?
I really think it's really going to be an academic debate. I don't see the conference, the way it's constituted and the way it's running, coming up with real structural changes. I think the forces are going to ensure a tendency towards the status quo. So it probably at best can make some cosmetic changes. Plus the fact that you do have the conference and you do have a National Assembly and a political class that is not necessarily on all fours with the National Conference. So there will need to be a secondary negotiation, which I don't think will necessarily go in favor of the conference. But I think it will be useful to talk up these ideas. The last conference we had, there was this settlement of the 13% derivation debate, which was useful. Beyond that, it really didn't
it also
do more.
appeared to have introduced a recognition of the so-called 6 geopolitical zones.
Correct. That now, I suppose, is accepted. Now, whether that will result in an alteration in the Constitution, I really very much doubt. Issues as to the strength of the center vis-a-vis the state, I'm not sure it's going to happen this time. But of course, the volume of the debate, I think, is intensifying. Probably there will be a lot more consensus in that regard. But I really don't see the conference breaking the ice in terms of those major issues.
Okay.
By the way, I don't think really I don't think those are the real problems.
Okay.
We could still skirt around those issues. It's still the fundamental issue really as to some measure of equity in how the arrangements are. So I it's an interesting conversation, but I don't think anything very serious will come out of it.
Interesting. Let's take another time out. Interesting conversations around politics, power, security in Nigeria. Looking forward. We'll be right back.
My name is Laide Awoyemi. I live for Lagos. You see as our new Lagos just define the go. Good thing good though. To go market now, no hard at all. Just pay. Sit down inside BRT bus. Small time, you don't reach where they go. Hospital call. The full ground. And for me and my pikin where I just born, treatment now free. You look left, you look right. Them they build new roads, new hospitals, new schools, new things everywhere. Everywhere they shine, gone. We thank God though. But come on, I hear saying that this tax money where they pay, I think then they used to do all these good things. Me I they pay my own tax too. Say they pay your own.
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back. I'm still talking political scenarios and related issues with Professor Wale Ajai of the Lagos Business School. Let's turn to the party system. Somehow, by design or by accident, we've stumbled into a broad two-party system. Again, as appears to have been a trend, we usually end up with something resembling a broad two-party system. But this time, we're not so sure what defines each of them. We see people cross across the aisle and go back again. Indeed, we have some people. I had someone joke that we have a speaker of parliament, of federal house, who nobody is sure which political party he indeed belongs to. How How do you see the political party system? Do you envisage more competitive elections going forward? And what needs to change or improve still, in your view?
I think the developments are positive. Has to be. But whether they will play out in the way we anticipate is a bit tricky. One must bear in mind the so-called African factor. Ganging up or coalescing to challenge the party in power has notoriously been very difficult in Africa. You see all the rhetoric, and when it's time to choose the flag bearer, those coalitions tend to fall apart. And I think for now, the PDP is doing a very serious job trying to,
repair its breaches
and try and do mischief in the in the APC. But it's interesting because it introduces political constraint into the system, which I think is useful. Probably means the PDP has to try and look for some consensus-based approaches. Of course, the issue of the status of the so-called decampees is a constitutional matter, it's a judicial matter which hopefully will be settled one way or the other. If it's settled negatively, then of course the PDP will obviously be on top in the House. But if the matter goes in favor of the APC, then probably we may see a play for majority rule in the APC. I mean, in the House of Reps by the APC. But there's still a lot of way to go, because you see people who previously were in APC decamping to PDP and so on and so forth. But to the extent that it seems that it is diffusing the ethnic tensions, you can see that all of a sudden Jonathan has northern voices saying, let him run. I think that is positive.
Okay, because there have been some exchanges around here. So a Shakara from Kano suddenly is...
Yeah, I think that's positive, because otherwise it would have been a real straight struggle, which polarizes the nation halfway. But the way it is now, it's an interesting conversation. So the issue is, why should he run? Why should he not run? And I think those are the type of conversations.
Are you concerned, in spite of and I do agree with you, that some of these movements have reduced the sharp demarcations, but there still seems to be a substantial discussion around ethnic, region, and more worryingly, religion as we approach 2015.
I think that is tamping down. If one takes the measure of the security meeting that held yesterday or so, and the apparent rebuke delivered to Vice Admiral Nyako, then it would appear as if the political elite are saying, let's cool matters down and don't let this go to So I think that is useful. My own assumption really is that when the crunch is down, the political elite will probably say, look, let's settle this in a quiet manner. So hopefully the issue is, don't let's miscalculate and turn this into a sectarian crisis, or give room for the Boko Harams of this world to play mischief.
Or indeed the military?
Indeed the military. Of course, although that would be terribly unpopular, but a situation where, God forbid, you do have a number of yaya bombings around will make the civilian administration look very, very weak, almost a nuisance, and that can be a temptation.
Interesting. Let's take a final time out. Interesting conversations. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. I'm talking political scenarios, and we've gone broadly across the many elements of what may happen around political risk in Nigeria. Now we turn to outlook, and we try and project forward. Let me start with the conference. I know you've kind of dimensioned what you think the possibilities are, and it doesn't look too revolutionary from your point of view. Is there, in your view, any risk that a fundamental disagreement at that conference could trigger negative consequences for our union. Do you see that risk or that possibility?
I really don't think so. And I think the way the conference has been constituted obviously will not allow that. As someone said, this is a conference of old men. Maybe if you had younger elements, you might have a Sarajevo development, but I don't think so. It may well just serve the purpose of allowing what you call venting. Let people vent their grievances. It reduces the pressure, and if things get a bit too excitable, you can be sure within the conference and outside the conference, people will be told to kiss and make up. So that is my prognosis.
Okay, so let's turn to 2015. There are those who think it's doomsday. Indeed, there's the funny dimension of people who maybe ignorantly say the U.S. has predicted that the country will come apart in 2015, and who see the way politics is going as evidence that the U.S. had omniscience regarding the future of Nigeria. So how do you see the 2015 elections? I may not expect you to predict a winner. I'll be happy if you choose to, but how do you see the whole process going on?
I think one has to be very realistic. If you have someone like General Gawan saying that the scenario is looking like civil war, then you know that the situation is serious. It's not necessarily out of hand. Look at this so-called civilian JTF development in Borno. You see a very strong emotional attachment to the idea of Nigeria, even by people who have been bombed out. You see a very strong repudiation of the apparent religious thrust of Boko Haram by the ordinary citizen. So I really don't think there's going to be any skittering towards a rabid religious agenda. Of course, there's a lot of bellicose talk, which is very unhelpful, which hopefully will be addressed. I really think the culprit here is the Jonathan administration. Because if you have developments like the civilian JTF, then we really needed a type of stance that brought the nation together, a type of stance that would look more like a unitary government type of approach. That is the type of approach that these times require. And there's no doubt that a president faced with severe pressure from internal, external elements can expect that the nation will sort of close ranks behind him if he adopts the correct style. Unfortunately, we have President Jonathan, indulging in petty abuse and petulant behavior. So if for some reason some of that can be moderated, then there's no doubt. I don't see anyone, sort of rushing to get out of Nigeria. And I certainly think the idea of Nigeria is still a very strong one. Of course, there are tensions and dangers. And certainly there will be some measure of exuberance around choosing of candidates in both parties, incidentally, and in the elections going forward. So we can expect that it's going to be a bit hair-raising, but I expect that we should have fair elections, credible elections, maybe contentious.
But at the end of the day, we will not step over the brink.
I don't think so.
Okay, interesting scenario. So Professor Ajai says, well, it might be rocky, but at the end of the day, it will all work out.
By the grace of God, it should.
We'll be right back. That was an interesting conversation. I take 4 points from that discussion. 1, the interoperability that we now know existed between the so-called Fulani herdsmen and Boko Haram in central Nigeria is a development the security agencies and the government needs to take more seriously. Secondly, my guest did not expect any earth-shaking outcomes from the national conference. If he's right, however, I wonder whether the country will have other opportunities to correct the defects in our federal system. Thirdly, I think the broad two-party system that seems to be emerging is a positive development. I hope the country can now move towards consolidating that progress towards policy-based and ideas-led politics and a stronger political party system that can lead to stronger governments. Finally, I do hope our politicians will step back from the brink and ensure that the 2015 elections is just one more step towards democratic consolidation in our country, rather than the apocalypse that some fear that it would be. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.